name is Suzanne LaGrande, and this is The Imaginary Possible, a show that looks at the captivating potentials and also the troubling realities of artificial intelligence. Today, my guest is Ross Monaghan, who is a former CEO of Australia's Mobile Phone Industry Association and now a professor of communications at Deakin University in Melbourne. Welcome.
Hi, Suzanne. Great to be here.
So I want to start by asking you a question about your experiences being a professor teaching at the university level today. How is AI being used by students?
I wish I really knew. Of course, many students don't want me to know, but yeah, look, that's one of the challenges of teaching at a university in 2023. But look, I guess it points to the question of how should we be encouraging students to use it? Now, of course, the simple answer, and most students will think, oh, I can use it to write my essay and I don't have to do any thinking or any reading. And look, I'm sure that there are lots of students that do that because they're under time pressures and a whole range of other reasons. It's just human nature. But what I've found is if you work with students and encourage them to use AI in a responsible way to actually help them be more creative, to help them think more critically, help them refine their work, that most students are really going to rise to the challenge and actually use the technology in a really positive way. So what I've learned this year is that universities and schools who are just saying, no, we're going to ban AI from the classroom isn't really a logical or sensible approach, that if you work with students, they're actually going to get a lot out of it and they're going to advance their understanding of a whole range of other issues. Of course, at universities, we're very focused on vocational outcomes as well. And when students leave and enter the workplace, if universities are going to ban this technology, that's not going to be good for students when they hit the workplace, and it's not going to be good for employers. So I think working with students is the way to go, encouraging them to use it in a responsible way that's really going to elevate their skills and their knowledge.
An example of how you're teaching students to use AI responsibly?
Yeah, well, and this is a kind of a funny example. It makes me laugh when I think about this. One of the challenges that I set my students was to brainstorm some simple ideas, and in this case, it was for I gave them a fictitious company developing some sort of weird product, and they had to come up with some names and then come up with a comms strategy. So, I wanted to emphasize that that AI is great at short-circuiting the brainstorming process. So it was a face-to-face class, and there were tables of about 6 students at each table, and there's probably about 6 or so tables. So I explained this task to my students and said, on your tables, the first thing I want you to do is brainstorm ideas for your company name, and then go out and develop some collateral for that business. And it was hilarious. As I walked around the classroom, students were staring at each other and not looking at their laptops or their mobile phones, and just staring at each other and making faces as I wandered through the tables. And finally I said, and there was not much activity, and I said, okay, everyone, stop. What would you do and how would you approach this if I wasn't in the room? And they all went, oh, ChatGPT. And I said, of course, this is a great way to come up with, maybe a dozen ideas. It'll get the process started. And I explained that probably those 12 ideas won't be, appropriate, but if you combine idea number 2 and number 6 and think about it, you'll probably come up with a really, really good idea. And so they did that, and they came up with some fairly good ideas fairly quickly. So, demonstrating to students that there are ways that you can use it to help you be more creative and more flexible is a really good approach. Little interesting footnote to that exercise. How do you think I came up with that idea for that exercise? I
I
asked ChatGPT. Now, again, I didn't just use what ChatGPT suggested. I used it as the basis of what I've done because, each year we tend to get into this set way of thinking. And I did it last year, so I'll do it this year. I really wanted to, make the class a bit more interesting for the students and myself, because if I'm interested in it, I'm going to have a much more interesting class as well. So, yeah, learning how to use it is appropriate, not just for us academics and for people in industry. I think we need to model appropriate behavior and how it can be used well.
Well, that actually leads me to the next question, which is how are professors and administrators using it? And are they open about using it?
I think it's a mixed bag. In fact, I know it's a mixed bag. I mean, there are some that won't use it for ethical reasons. No, I'm not going to upload this content to ChatGPT because this is my this is my work, and there's the potential it could get shared with other people. Legitimate concern. It's just I'm only 10 years away from retirement, so I don't need to know about AI. I'm just going to teach the course the way I have for many, many years. There are others and very legitimately are really busy on their research and other teaching. And there's a bit of a steep learning curve to get on, to learn how to use AI. And I'm sure that there are a range of other issues as well. But I think it's important that all academics have a bit of an understanding of how they can use AI in their work, because then it's going to give you an insight into how students can use it. There are different professions, of course, that are going to be more impacted than not by AI in the short term. In the long term, I think, as the World Economics Forum says, it's the fourth industrial revolution. So everyone and every job is going to be impacted. But in the short term, I think, academics using it and seeing how it can be used, whether it's, used in classroom practice or not, I think just sharing their experience with students is really, really important. So for all my colleagues out there, invest a little bit of time into using it. Use your learned experiences and your knowledge and your skills to identify the opportunities and, importantly, the risks of AI, and then share that with students. I think that's our responsibility.
Mm-hmm. The ability to analyze information and to come up with useful insights and to make connections, that's some of what you learn as you learn that's part of academic training. Is that something that we are outsourcing to something like ChatGPT? And is that a problem? Are we basically giving the really powerful ability that we have over to a computer to start to make really important decisions for us? I'm wondering.
Absolutely. I mean, that is a big concern of mine. And I think that is one of the risks for society. Having observed pretty closely the impact of mobile phones on society, and I've also done a lot of work on social media within organizations and individuals as well. And even just in, observing what my family and my friends and students in my class, the impact that social media has had, I think it's had a profound impact on society. I mean, our attention spans are dramatically shorter than they were. I think we're seeing the implications of that in the classroom, with students not wanting to sit down and read books or spend any more than a couple of minutes analyzing something already. And this is just because social media and the early stages of AI. So I have a lot of concerns about the impact that's going to have on our ability to critically think. And that is going to have significant impacts, not just in organizations and in academic institutions, but I think that's going to have really dramatic impact on society and our democracies as well. I've got a lot of concerns about the lack of critical thinking about decisions and policies of governments around the world already. I think, when you add AI into the mix and how bad actors and even actors with good intentions are going to be using this, I think there are going to be significant implications for us.
What can we do, since this is not going away, to create more opportunities for critical thinking about AI or anything else, really?
Yeah.
Because that's a real challenge, right?
It really is. And we're fighting against multinational companies that are making billions of dollars with huge resources. AI is not, some gift to society from, large organizations. I mean, these are services developed by billionaires to help them make more money. Let's be open about that. I mean, AI is a commercial product. Microsoft and Google are making a lot of money, and so are the other developers out there. So, that's one of the problems that we're having. Social media is exactly the same issue. The Alphabet and Meta are making a lot of money, as so too are a lot of other companies. So we're fighting that. They're fighting for our attention, for advertising, to create that revenue. Governments are slow to react. Of course, there's lobbyists. I'm a former lobbyist myself out there, though the big businesses are lobbying governments to have a light touch approach to these kinds of issues. So we're really up against it. I mean, there are some really interesting fight backs that are happening. I noticed one on TikTok the other day. Quiet walking is becoming a thing, believe it or not. Could you imagine, Suzanne, going for a walk and not being plugged in and just walking along in a park without any technology? That's actually a thing now. It's a trend on TikTok, and people are going, wow, this is amazing. It was really hard for the first couple of minutes because my brain was going and then I started to think about things, and it was amazing. In Australia, many schools are now, and high schools are banning phones from the classroom, which I think is a good thing, giving students that time to be able to invest some time in actual thinking. I see so many parents out at restaurants now, and they give their kids iPads and stuff. So kids are never bored anymore. And I don't know about you, Suzanne, but, when I was bored, when I was younger, that's when I was, most creative. And I thought I had to think about what I could do to occupy myself and how I could entertain myself. Look, I see that as an issue as well. I feel like I'm lucky that I've known a time when, I wasn't contactable 24/7. Am I confident that we'll be able to encourage people to spend more time without the technology? I'm not hopeful, but I think it's a good thing for people to do, and I certainly encourage my students to do it, because my goal as an academic, for most of my students, they're in my course because they want to be professional communicators. And I explain that being able to think critically, being able to think creatively, whilst there are lots of technological tools that can help you do some of these things, you need to be able to do it yourself. Because, I was just at an employer a couple of days ago, and we were talking about how you're going to assess whether job applicants do actually have these skills. And they're now talking about, every single shortlisted person is going to be asked in, and they will have to handwrite, a media release or an email without spell checking or AI being able to write it for them. So on a very practical level, I think going into the workplace, it's going to be really important for graduates to have these critical thinking skills.
You are listening to The Imaginary Possible, a show about the captivating potentials and the troubling realities of artificial intelligence today. I'm your host, Suzanne LaGrande, and this is KBOO Community Radio, KBOO 90.7 FM in Portland. One of the things that you teach, I believe, is public relations and crisis communications. I'm wondering if you could talk about any recent case of a PR crisis involving artificial intelligence, just to give us a sense of like, what does the landscape look like these days?
Well, that's an issue that I can tell you that a lot of organizations are putting a lot of thinking into. And if anyone wants help with that, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Look, I think that's a challenge for organizations because, of course, being the fourth industrial revolution, AI is going to significantly help organizations be more productive and do what they do better. So those efficiencies are really important to organizations. But the flip side is when you're looking at those things, there are inherent risks. Some we know about, some of those risks we don't even know yet. So trying to identify those risks is really important. So thinking about change management, thinking about how your organization is going to manage this change is really important. The first thing I would suggest to organizations is, getting a cross-functional group of people within your organization together, talking about how it's being used, how it's being implemented, any small problems that are arising so that you can document those. You can start to then think about policies, procedures, and training. You can start to think about compliance and legal issues, which are really important as well. And then there are other elements, but for me as a communicator, one thing that I like to stress is that whilst that compliance and those legal issues are really important, the other part of this is the community license to operate. And I learned this when I was the head of the Mobile Phone Industry Association. Whilst mobile phones and mobile phone towers, according to the scientists, are safe, yet in the early days, and even now with 5G technology coming out, there is a lot of concern about the community, about health impacts and what it means for society. The communities were forcing carriers to locate mobile phone towers, in areas that weren't optimal because of those health fears. What the industry and what I and the industry worked out was that this outrage factor, that risk isn't just a matter of the hazard, that's the amplitude of the disaster and multiplied by the likelihood that it's going to happen. The risk is not just that, it's outrage as well. What is the community going to think about these issues? What are the community fears? And I think it's fair to say that just like, mobile phone technology and social media fears, there are a lot of concerns about AI, whether it's going to take over the world, whether it's going to destroy the world. I don't believe for a minute that is the case. But working with communities and stakeholders when you're implementing this is really important. And this is where professional communicators and the public relations people within organizations are going to be well placed to help organizations because they're experts at dealing with and communicating on a two-way form with internal stakeholders and external stakeholders like other businesses, community groups, activists, governments, investors. Understanding and bringing all of these groups of people along on the AI journey is really, really important. So if you're a CEO, if you're in charge of an organization, understand that the industry is looking at, responsible AI, but there's this whole other area of, outrage and consultation about AI that we need to take into account. In short, I think, being open, honest, and transparent about the technology and how you're using it is going to be really, really important. But bring your stakeholders and your communities along with you on the journey. Don't exclude them and then just say, this is what's happening.
A lot of businesses, certainly educational institutions, and probably everybody is starting to think about policies, right? And how to formulate policies around AI usage that incorporate what you just talked about, both the
Yeah.
sense of community fears and the different people that are involved, and kind of what the reality is, and communicating that. Can you say a little bit about how one would go about formulating a policy given the complex nature of all of the different
Yeah.
people involved?
Yeah, that's right. It is complex, and we're entering somewhat uncharted waters, right? I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, next month, let alone next year or the year after that. So the first thing I would say is that, policies are going to need to evolve. So just because we don't know what's going to happen in 2 years' time doesn't mean that we can't start documenting and thinking about policies for what is happening now. So starting that process, starting the conversations, starting to document any problems or opportunities that are present already is really, really important. And that's where being open and trusting employees, I think, is going to be really important. Trust with a layer of training and helping them understand where the boundaries are. Because one of the things that I noted when I did a lot of work on social media and social media policy for people like governments and military and commercial organizations is if you ban the technology, then that creates a whole new level of risk. It doesn't take the risk away, because one of the things that I found hilarious back in the day was that people were saying, we're going to ban our employees in the office using social media. And what did employees do? They just picked up their mobile phone and started using Google and Instagram and technology there. And it was the failures and the risks were being undocumented within the organization. So starting these conversations with employees, having a look at existing policies on things like social media. There are some industry associations that have generic guidelines and policies. They're going to help. Your lawyers and your regulatory people within organizations are going to help as well. So too are the HR. All of these people need to be brought into the conversation to develop these policies. And then, of course, once you've got them, you need to modify them and change them and adapt them over time. An important part is thinking about training as well. So training staff, making sure that they understand the policies, be able to feedback any problems that they're having, or picking up on any opportunities that are being excluded for the organization because of the policies. All these things are really, really important for organizations to think about on an ongoing basis.
Are there things that people aren't talking about or thinking about that they should be?
One of the things that I'm really keen to get people to think about is being AI leaders. And I think that was one of the reasons that you reached out to me about this. I think it's incumbent on us all to think about these issues, whether you're working for an organization or not. Ask questions. One of the things that I'm really grateful for in my career is that I learned to ask questions, because my first real job was as a journalist, and you've got to ask lots of questions. And I think we should be asking questions of government. We should be asking questions of the AI industry, rather than just accepting that this is being done to us. If we don't ask these questions and we don't tell the industry and governments and the policymakers what we expect, then we're just going to get stuff that, is going to make the industry more money. So when organizations like Microsoft, who are putting a lot of time into thinking about these issues, plonk new technology on us, their Copilot for Teams and a whole range of other services, ask the question, how is my data safe? How is this really helping me? Where is that going? What are the risks of this? They're the ones making the money, so push back on them. Get your questions answered. And I think that's really important. And I don't think enough people are asking questions, and we should be. The other side of this, as I already mentioned, is that outrage factor as well. So I think engaging people in the conversations about the implementation of AI, whether it's staff, and make no mistake, there are a lot of staff who are very, very concerned about their jobs. I know my students are in professional communication are really worried that their jobs are going to be taken over by AI. So starting these conversations, talking about how these issues are going to be managed is really, really important, both for internal stakeholders, but external stakeholders as well. Talk about, the organizations that are doing contract work for you, talking with the policymakers in your industry and government, talking with community and customers, what they expect, explaining these things, how it's going to save customers time, money, or how it's going to help you produce better products. I think that, we don't want to get to the point where outrage about this technology is going to limit some of the really amazing opportunities and benefits that it's going to bring us. So be a leader, but also make sure that we're engaging with stakeholders so that this technology is adapting and we're taking care of, biases and making sure it's not discriminatory, and all of those things that good organizations that have good ESG or environmental, social, and governance policies have and take AI development into account.
Mm-hmm. I've been speaking today with Ross Monaghan, who is a professor of communications at Deakin University in Melbourne, Australia. If people want to find out more about your work, where can they go?
Probably the easiest is on LinkedIn. I've made it pretty easy. They can just go to rossmonahan.live/LinkedIn. On social media, most of my social media accounts are The Media Pod, so THEMEDIAPOD. That's back in the day when I was podcasting about 15, 20 years ago.
And you are one of the people who is interested in helping organizations write policies. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm doing a lot of work with government, non-for-profit organizations and some commercial organizations, but also I'll give a big shout out to the International Association of Business Communicators. I'm the vice chair for the Asia Pacific region. I've just come back from a conference in Indonesia, and I was on a panel with Microsoft and a few other AI organizations talking about these issues. So industry associations like aieducation.com are great. You could share views and share thoughts about these sort of issues. Getting the conversation started, I think, is really, really important.
Right. Well, thank you so much for being on
Suzanne.
The show today. You're listening to The Imaginary Possible, a show about the captivating potentials and troubling realities of artificial intelligence today. I'm Suzanne LaGrande, and this is KBOO Community Radio, KBOO 90.7 FM in Portland. To listen to this and other episodes of The Imaginary Possible, visit us online at kboo.fm or theimaginarypossible.com. Thanks so much for listening.